Hi, and welcome to another narrative, presented by yours truly, Cryptids Roost. If you enjoy this and any other stories, please be so kind as to hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. This will help with the YouTube's algorithm and will promote the channel more. Now, even though I'm not yet monetized by YouTube, I have now created some awesome merch for you guys. Please be so kind as to visit redbubble.com/people/Cryptids Roost and grab yourself a t-shirt, mug, wall clock, or even a shower curtain, or whatever grabs your fancy. The link is in the description. Oh, and thank you all for helping us to reach the first milestone of 100 subscribers. Next milestone, 500. I'm sure we can do it. Oh, and don't forget to leave a comment. Maybe tell us how you would handle the upcoming situations in the story. So grab your coffee, sit back and enjoy the show. The Mysterious Life of a Cryptid Hunter, Part 1. This amazing story is written by Reddit user TheThickFrog15. Now, before I explain my profession, let me tell you the truth. There are monsters in the world, and they're almost all out for your blood. Luckily, there are people to keep them at bay. I am one of those people. Now, I'm long retired for about 15 years, but I've seen my share of blood, guts, demonic possessions, and things with more teeth than normal. So I'm here to give you an idea of the shit I've encountered. Okay, let's start with the basics. My dad was a cryptid hunter, the top of his class actually. He has probably seen way more than I have. He specialised in long-range type missions, many of which occurred in forested areas, but he also tackled some more close-range, for lack of a better word, missions. He's killed things from ancient werewolves worshipped by Indians to the mighty Mothman of Point Pleasant. He's tough, but the things he couldn't kill were known as specialised cases. These were monsters that had brains, or hadn't done anything wrong at that point, or monsters that the government just wanted them to be kept alive for one reason or another. One of these cases was a girl named Emily, but we'll get to her later. For now, let's talk about my stories of woe. My name is Tom. I'm 36. I was chosen for this job because of my connection with the military, combined with my dad's friends knowing me. I was in. But, questionable hiring aside, my first case was simple. A chupacabra had been killing sheep and attacked a farmer. We were worried that it might develop a taste for human flesh. So they sent me to a ranch in the middle of nowhere, Mexico. Now, chupacabra are a bitch to catch, but they're a walk in the park compared to some other cryptids. It required a weird cycle of putting out half-rotted sheep meat and waiting. I repeated this for days, but finally it came. I first saw it sniffing the fly-covered sheep meat, and I readied my sniper rifle. Just as I was about to pull the trigger, it saw me and leapt almost directly on top of me. It had at least jumped a good 20 feet forwards and 10 feet high. It clawed my arm up, but I grabbed my trench knife and I sunk it into the beast's left shoulder. It recoiled and roared in agony. Less of a roar, more of a human scream mixed with a cougar. I drew a shotgun out from a backpack I carried and blew its head off. I got up, wrapped my bloody arm in bandages and loaded the corpse into my car and drove away. When I got back, it was discovered that other hunters had caught another cryptid, a girl named Emily. Emily looked, for what I could tell, completely human, but she had something that was up with her. Despite looking 8 years old max, black long hair, brown eyes, she could solve math problems near instantly. Like I'm talking 7-digit number multiplication in at most 2 seconds. She talked like she was in a professional meeting with the President of the US. She appeared to have no feelings besides hatred. I was tasked with guarding the interviewer in her cell. The conversation goes as follows. Interviewer: Good evening, Emily. Emily: Good evening, sir. Interviewer: Need anything before we continue? Emily: No sir, I'm fine. Interviewer: What do you feel right now? What do you see? Emily looks around the room. I see everything. I see the fear in your eyes. I see the clock ticking to 10:50 p.m. and I see the evil in him. Points at me. Interviewer: Okay, what do you feel? Emily: Must I really answer that when I've taken thousands of lives because of it? This girl had killed over 2,000 people before her capture, and I was in the same room with this monster, but she looked completely human. When I noticed her eyes weren't normal. They seemed to look normal one second, then expanded into nothing but a black void the other second. Eyes of hatred, eyes of a desire to kill everyone and everything. Then she grew. She went from an 8-year-old to my age, 21, in an instant. My grip on my handgun tightened. Emily: Sir, please step out the room. I don't want to hurt someone like you. Interviewer: Wait, don't leave. His plea was silenced when Emily lunged from her seat. She drew a small knife from one of her boots she was wearing and plunged it into the man's eye socket. He screamed and I fired my gun. It hit her point blank in the side, but she shook it off. I bolted out of there, shutting the door, and secured the 3 locks on the door and alerted the guards. My boss came. He said that because of how dangerous Emily is, they can't risk any more people. So they left the man there and gave me my next mission. My next mission was to find a cryptid known only as codename Pale. Codename Pale is a 10-foot pale being with no defining features on its face, save a big bloodshot eye in the centre. Its agenda is mostly unknown, and what is known is classified information. But what differs it from other cryptids is that it has the uncanny ability to read the minds of its victims, understand the human mind, and even learn sign language apparently when it escaped. So I got in my car, found the coordinates of where it was last spotted, this time being somewhere in Arizona, and haul ass to that spot. Fucker was still there, sitting on a tree stump, waiting. I snuck through the bushes, loaded my shotgun, and took aim. I know you want to kill me, Tom. I know you're there. Come out of your spot. The voice, oh God, the voice. It sounded like a man speaking through a microphone. It echoed there where there was no possible way for it to echo. I spoke. You know I'm here to kill you. Pale. You pick up hints when you're sitting on a tree stump enjoying the Arizona night. Then someone in a loud ass truck hauling ass up the hill towards you gets out with a shotgun and hides in the bushes. He was joking around. He knew where on the map he was. He knew what cars and guns are. He could swear. This Pale was no ordinary cryptid. He knew his way. He understood the concept of human interaction. So I questioned him. How did you understand that you were going to die and joke about it, all the while staring death in the face? Pale. My friend, you're not death. Me. But you're going to die by my hand. Doesn't that make me death in this situation? Pale. Neither of us are death. Death is its own thing. Think of death as a disease that slowly eats away at your life. You can either spread it or keep it to yourself. Either way, you and I are going to die. Those who are affected by death are not death itself. Me. But you're going to die. Death spreads death. The Grim Reaper spreads death, and therefore is death. If the act of spreading death makes you death, I am death. Pale. Those who are affected by death are not death itself. Me. Sorry, Pale, this talk was fun, but I gotta kill you. Pale. Very well. This entity was quite the Aristotle. I took aim and shot him in the chest. Pale went down. I got him and drove him back to my headquarters and was given my next mission the next week. The mission was to find a Bigfoot. Yes, a Bigfoot. Not the Bigfoot that killed at least 200 people in a forest in Canada. I flew there, and after a week I found my perfect spot near a big ass cave near where the sightings were most frequent. I waited days, surviving off of granola bars and water, but I saw him walk out of a cave on a Tuesday afternoon. I was munching on my 50th granola bar that day. He noticed me in the bushes. The last thing I saw before bolting for better cover was a good 500-pound boulder barreling towards me. I basically jumped from my spot into a thicket of trees and began running. You would believe that he was at least somewhat affected by the trees, and to that I envy you. As I was dodging trees and getting ripped up by thorn bushes, he was smashing through the trees, enduring crotch shots that would make even my dad weep in pain. I spun around quickly and fired a shot with my sniper rifle. It sliced through his left shoulder, drawing blood, but he slammed me into the side with his long monkey arms. I crashed through at least 20 feet worth of trees. I slammed into the ground with a sickening crunch as my ribs cracked. By the time I was up, he was running at me again. I knew that I can't outrun him, so I drew my knife and rushed him, sinking it into his side. He roared in rage and agony. I put my sniper rifle to his head and fired. The beast fell. He was 8 feet tall, so when he fell, he rumbled the ground a bit. Like always, I packed him into the car and drove away. After I got him to my boss, I got a strange request from the guards that guard the cells that contain the specialised cases. It was a note from Emily. She said how she wanted me moved to that guard duty. Naturally, it was sent right to me before anything bad happened. I walked to Emily's cell. She greeted me with a hello, and I repeated the greeting. She asked so that I was in the room with her, heavily guarded of course. She spoke. Emily, you know how I said you're evil? Me, the only evil person evil here is you. Emily, cold, direct and correct. I'm impressed. Me, why did you bring me here? Emily, quite simply, I brought you here so that I can show you one of my abilities other than shape-shifting. Me, trying to break the tension. Is that a monster's way of flirting? Emily, negative. I'm here to say that I have more abilities. All of a sudden, one of the guards' heads explodes out of nowhere. Me, Jesus Christ, what the hell was that? Emily, it was not of my doing. Look. I turned around and saw a horrifying sight. The guard had been shot. Soldiers were raiding the area. Me, what? He's dead. What do we do? Other guard dies. Emily, I suggest that we make a run for it. Even though I can hold my own, I don't want a person like you to die. Me, okay, but stay the fuck close. I don't want you to go around killing people. So here I was, sneaking my way through a monster prison with a girl that killed almost 2,000 people right behind me, all while military personnel are raiding the building. This couldn't get any worse, can it? Well, as it goes, it did. We were in the second wing of the building, only one wing away from the exit, when a Mothman jumped me. It bit down hard on my shoulder, causing me to shriek in pain. I drew my knife and shoved the blade into its torso. It screamed and got off me before crashing through a glass cell holding a goat man, which proceeded to charge out of instinct straight into Emily's path. Before I could speak, the goat man, or what was left of him, was splattered against the wall. Emily stood there holding a nearby pair of scissors. It took me a while to realise that what was splattered against the wall was its brain. Emily had gutted the poor bastard like a fish and had enough time to perform extreme brain surgery. I got up. Nice job, I said. After that, we booked it to the exit. Now came the hard part, what to do with Emily. She didn't seem like the cold monster she was in the facility. She was glad, happy even, to be in the outside world. Yet 5 seconds ago, she gutted a goat man faster than a ninja in an anime can slice through something mid-air. When I questioned her about it later, she said that she was the last surviving subject of a failed attempt to make super soldier. Think, a soldier with the highest rank in military experience with guns, knows almost every form of martial arts, and then with the speed and agility of a methed up chipmunk. Now multiply that by 100, give them shape-shifting abilities, and you get close to Emily's capabilities. Turns out she means well, has an IQ of almost 200, and can tell if someone asking her questions is a spy. She has been hunted down by the military since she escaped the facility at 8 years old. And the high-ass kill count? All military personnel. The monster hunters had to capture her so that the public won't find out about her backstory. Pretty cool. Also, she was cool with the facility keeping her, although she said it could get a bit stuffy, all in that cold, matter-of-fact tone. Cut to 2 months later. Me, Emily and my best friend turned monster hunter, Josh, were in the Alaskan wilderness, tracking down a Yeti. And before you ask, yes, there is a difference between a Bigfoot and a Yeti. For starters, a Yeti is much taller, like Bigfoot can only be 8 feet tall. However, there are reports of Yetis becoming staggering 26 feet in height. Needless to say, we asked for some heavy-duty tools. The next difference is their behaviour. While Bigfoot only attack when provoked or their territory is invaded, Yetis could wipe out entire villages without even waking up on the wrong side of their rock bed. So, we are tracking this thing down in the snow. I was scouting out the area when Josh asked. Josh: "So, Tom, how's Emily?" Me: "Just as murderous as always." Josh, being the shit-talking douche he is: "I've been seeing you two exchange glances." Me: "Remember, Josh, you're not the one here with a high-powered sniper rifle." Josh: "Oh, come on, man, it was just a prank." Me: "Also, knowing how Josh loves pranks that cause a lot of damage, you said that when you egged my car." Josh: I'll fucking do it again." Our banter was cut short by a roar so loud it seemed to rumble the ground beneath our feet, followed by a tree hurtling towards us like a wooden torpedo. I heard Emily scream, "Get down!" as it crashed into the ground, nearly connecting with my head. Then silence. I sat up and looked through the scope of my rifle. I saw the Yeti crashing through the trees, making a beeline for us. I fired a shot, which whistled through the air and hit the beast in the kneecap. It roared in pain, but kept its pace. We slid down into a frozen creek and kept low. Josh was breathing heavily, but kept his cool somehow. I was keeping a straight face, something I'm really good at. Hell, the other hunters even nicknamed me Poker Face for that reason. Emily was the same, but less relaxed than me. She was gripping her shotgun tightly. I held my breath. The monster was right where we wanted it. I hesitated. The Yeti was sniffing round, getting increasingly closer to our position. It grabbed Josh and swung him into a tree. The crack of Josh hitting the tree is in my mind forever. Emily shot it in the chest, ran up to the rock, jumped from it, and nailed the 19-foot behemoth in the head with a well-placed tornado kick, but it slammed her into the ground. I fired again. It sliced through the side of the neck. He saw where the bullet came from and nearly pulverized me with his hand. I rolled out of the way just in time, but he backhanded me into a tree. The sickening feeling of my ribs cracking almost made me throw up. The Yeti walked up, picked me up by my head, and sat. The beast could crack my skull like an overripe blueberry. I stopped moving. body frozen in fear. When Josh fished out the Molotov cocktail in his pack and tossed one onto the Yeti, it went up in flames, screaming. It dropped me into the creek, breaking the ice, causing my poor back to come into contact with freezing water and the rocky bottom of the creek at the same time. The monster crashed to the ground, a burning turd of what was once a Yeti. Still wallowing in pain, I opened my eyes to see Emily. She was staring at me, pale. "Are you okay, Tom?" she asked. I nearly jumped if it wasn't for the pain. She had asked a question with genuine concern for my safety. This is not the Emily I once knew. I just sat there looking. "What? Are you in too much pain to speak?" she asked. I snapped back to reality and said, "No, I'm just surprised you just asked me that." But deep down, her question confused me. Not for the actual question itself, but how she said it. After informing my boss about the situation, he said that I should get well soon, a pretty mundane type of response. But knowing my boss and his love of underlying messages, I pressed him about it. He said this: "Boss, there is another cryptid in Alaska." Me: "Is it another Yeti?" Boss: "No, it's something way worse." Me: "Okay, like how worse?" Boss: "It's a Wendigo." A Wendigo? In Alaska? The perfect bitch slap of fate to ruin my day. If you didn't know, Wendigos are some of the most deadliest cryptids out there. They're fast, mean, and don't go down without a fight. How do I know this? My dad was tasked with killing a baby version of these bastards. Only about 6 feet tall, 3 times smaller than an adult. And it almost killed him. He was able to give it a lethal dose of cyanide via the Wendigo killers. Wendigos eat almost anything, so it would eat a bottle filled with weird liquid by shoving it in its mouth and pumping 3 slugs into the beast's brain, and that was only the baby. Okay, so it turns out that there wasn't just us hunting this thing down. 3 other people were sent to go with us to hunt this thing. We were in a military-esque car driving through the forest of Alaska on the outskirts of a small village. I was riding shotgun, a hunter named Mike was driving, Emily and Josh were in the second row of seats, and 2 other humans, 2 males, Jaden and Bob, were riding in the 3rd row. Mike: "You know what a Wendigo looks like?" Me: I've seen them in the manual." Mike: "Don't worry, you'll know. Deer-like head, very thin, roughly 6 meters, very scruffy fur that hangs from his body." Emily: "Sounds a lot like a skinwalker." Mike: "Yeah, they're getting pretty similar, but a skinwalker is a calm, calculating hunter with an attitude, as well as a shape-shifting abilities that evolve from corrupted shamans. A Wendigo is a cannibalistic savage beast with an attitude that evolves from some twat eating human flesh." It was about 10 o'clock at night. We were driving at a normal pace when Mike stopped. "Hey, why did the car stop?" said Josh. Mike slowly pointed in front of him. We all looked and froze with him. There seemed to be what looked like a mangled deer carcass sitting straight up. One issue, however: it was too big to be a deer. Slowly it rose up from its crouching position. Its arms hung low to its knees. Its fur was snarled and scruffy. Its horns were caked with blood, along with the beast's snout, hands and its feet. We had just interrupted a Wendigo midway through his snack. The person was still moaning and occasionally convulsing on the ground. The Wendigo's eyes adjusted to the light, and a wide, toothy smile slowly came up its face. It licked its lips. It got ready to pounce. Just as the Wendigo was about to jump onto the car, Mike gunned it, slamming straight into the beast's body. The Wendigo rolled over the car, its bones creating a stomach-churning, squeaking noise as it did. We left her in the dust, supposedly. 5 seconds later, it was bounding towards the car, roaring. I struck my head out the window and fired my assault rifle. Several rounds tore through the beast's skin, but it just screeched and continued bounding after us. Josh dropped one of his cocktails, lighting up the ground behind us. The Wendigo leapt over the 12-foot high flames and was able to slash the back tyre out of our car. Me: okay, this isn't part of the plan, right? Mike: no, it's not. Jaden: I got a double action shotgun, it could do some damage. Mike: right, what do we need you two to do to be able to hit it? Jaden: I've got to get close. Emily: I can help with that. Mike: what can she do that we can't? Me: you'll be surprised, Mike. Mike: okay, fine, just get this damn thing off my tail. Jaden leaned out of the car. I readied my AR for another barrage of bullets to be sent the Wendigo's way. Emily drew a barbed wire whip. I watched with wide eyes as Emily snagged the Wendigo's right leg. It fell and got dragged. Still roaring and slashing, the Wendigo batted Emily off. Emily got tangled in the barb and almost fell on top of the monster. I grabbed a part of the whip. My hand got snagged on the barb. I bared through the pain and pulled Emily and the Wendigo closer to the truck. Jaden took aim, but out of nowhere the Wendigo slashed another tyre. The car spun out and crashed. I remember waking up. I crawled out to the mangle of metal that was once a truck. I dragged Josh, Mike, Jaden and Bob out. One missing: Emily. I got to her. Her torso was cut up by the barbs. Her breathing was laboured and she was bleeding. I got her out. When all of a sudden the Wendigo jumped up. Jaden pumped a slug into its left eye socket, destroying most of its head. It roared in pain, but batted Jaden away. Mike shot it in the stomach with his revolver. It once again batted him away. Bob shot it with his crossbow, but he got slashed away. While we were in bad shape, the Wendigo was dying. Its breathing was fast and shallow. Its body was riddled with burns, gunshot wounds and arrows. Finally, it dropped, its breathing becoming even more fast and laboured. Josh grabbed one of the Molotov cocktails and shoved it into its mouth. The beast gulped and exploded. Its chest burst from the pressure and flames. It screamed, but its screams were different, sounding more human than normal. After watching the light show that was that, I went to care for Emily. I gently unwrapped the barb, bandaged her up and made sure she drank some water. The Wendigo was still breathing, but it was fading. We all gathered round and watched this monster. To think that this was once a human was chilling. A person resorted to the most extreme and desperate measures in order to survive. Mike handed me his revolver. I nodded. I knew what to do. I limped up to the heaving beast, just barely clinging on to life, and I put a bullet in its head. But as its eyes slowly closed shut, I saw its eyes shift from rage to confusion to realization to panic to denial. Every single human emotion in its most raw and desperate form flashed through its thing's eyes, something I've always just ignored because I was too busy thinking about the rush killing these things gave me. And finally its eyes turned into acceptance, then blank. In the final moments of its life, the Wendigo had found out that it was going to die, felt every emotion from anger to guilt about all the people it killed, and died accepting that it was going to die, a monster in the eyes of everyone it had ever knew and loved. And to be that desperate to accept and come to a conclusion like that, I couldn't handle it. I burst into tears, sobbing, screaming. I dropped to my knees. This monster found peace at the final moments of its life, and knew full well that it was the last time it would ever feel those feelings. I started crying even harder. Everyone else wasn't doing very well either. They had just picked up on the signals about the poor Wendigo. Jaden was in shock. Bob was in a similar state. Josh was crying with me. But the worst was Mike and Emily's expressions. Mike, a 65-year-old battle-hardened hunter, had tears running down his face. But Emily, same age as me, she was the worst to look at. While everyone else wasn't trying to hide their emotions, Emily was trying her absolute hardest. She was nearly choking from her attempts to hold in her sadness, but it broke into these guttural, painful sobs. Emily, the coldest person I know, was crying along with everyone else, but something inside her changed that night, as if she knew all the pain she caused. She walked up and hugged me tightly. "Everything will be all right," she said, and she kissed my forehead. By the time I had really come to realise what happened, I was still sobbing. But I got up, walked Emily with everyone else to the mangled thing that was supposed to be a car, and questioned her about it on the way back. Me: "Why did you kiss me?" Emily: "Well, my entire life was filled with hatred. I hated everyone and everything. But when you got me out of the facility instead of leaving me alone, something clicked. I knew what it was to like to love." Jaden, Mike and Bob: "Aww." Josh, amid the awing: "Called it." Cut forward to now. Emily and I are happily married. Josh is a chemist. Mike is a happy, healthy 80-year-old coot and lives in a nursing home, and Emily occasionally visits. Jaden is my age and is an engineer. Bob is about 11 years older than me, and he's in IT. Emily is a therapist for a big company, and I'm a zoologist studying species of animals. Things are going great. I hope you enjoyed my story, but I gotta go. I gotta go feed my cat. The Mysterious Life of a Cryptid Hunter, Part 2. This brilliant series is written by Reddit user TheThickFrog15. Hello, I'm Josh. You probably know me from the story my friend Tom posted. And yes, I'm a chemist and part-time cryptid hunter, mixing salt and water by day, hunting monsters by night. It pays quite well, and getting outside is a good change to my usual indoor type job. But let's get to how I found the profession. I grew up in New Jersey. I loved nature at that age. I remember walking around the Pine Barrens with Tom. We were about 16 years old, so we were borderline brain dead when it came to safety, but we were walking around when Tom froze. "What the hell is that?" he asked. I replied, "Jersey Devil?" The monster looked 10 feet tall, probably 70 pounds, goat head, with almost adorable looking wings. It saw us and screeched, and then charged. Tom and I ran like hell straight to Tom's dad's house, the Jersey Devil chasing us all the way there. When we got there, Tom banged on the door. It was locked. I couldn't get it open. I searched the ground for a weapon. I found a good-sized stick and held my ground. The devil stopped and cocked his head sideways and gave me a confused look. It's probably never seen a human stand up to it. Then a shotgun blast took off most of its head. Tom's dad walked up to the corpse, gave it a kick, and spoke. "Never seen a devil die so quickly. It must have been unhealthy." "Excuse me? What the heck?" I responded. Tom's dad replied, "Did Tom ever tell you I was a cryptid hunter?" Cut to 4 years later, I was wandering through that same patch of barrens where that event took place with a pretty high hunting rifle. I was quietly thinking about whether I should have a pack of instant noodles or order pizza when the devil struck. It jumped onto me, slashing the hell out of my torso. I kicked it off and fired a shot into its chest. It screeched again and slashed 3 deep scars into my face. I nailed it with the butt of my rifle and bashed the butt again into its stomach. I fired into its head, killing it. "Ha ha! I think we've been here before, haven't we?" I said, laughing. I loaded the corpse into my truck and drove away. That was my 20th mission. Now cut to about a month after the Wendigo incident. I was 21, in a restaurant, munching on some hot wings, when Tom, his new girlfriend Emily, Jaden and Bob walked through the doors. "Sup, Tom?" I said. "Hey, what's up, Josh?" Tom replied. Emily, Bob and Jaden watched as me and Tom did our handshake, which was made to be obnoxiously long and ended with a high five. We were enjoying a happy time for a bit when Bob spoke. "I have news for you guys," and I replied, "What?" "Skinwalker is news, right?" Bob responded. "Oh boy," Tom exclaimed. "Jaden, the jokester he is, what about the Skinwalker? Is his name Gerald and he makes little hats for people in need?" "His name is Paul, actually," said Emily. "An agent named Paul had accidentally dabbled in dark magic and became a skinwalker, who was now prowling through the Florida Everglades. I was surprised that a cryptid hunter would be that big of an idiot to do that. I nearly choked on the hot wing I was eating. A skinwalker in Florida! The only way it could be more out of its roaming distance than in Florida is if it was in Antarctica or at the bottom of the ocean." I finished my wings and sipped the half-empty soda I had, and then spoke. "Damn, that's crazy," Tom replied. "All that build-up for a damn that's crazy?" "I disappoint people when surprised," I responded. We talked for a bit and eventually dipped out the door. I was wandering the streets towards my apartment when I heard a rustling and a tapping and a weak hissing noise. I spun around to see a pale white entity slip into a dark alleyway. I skulked into the same alleyway when I heard a voice. "Good day to you, Josh." I followed up with, "Show yourself." I then saw a 10-foot, mostly white figure slip out from behind a dumpster. It had no facial features, minus a piercing bloodshot eye, codename Pale. In spite of having no mouth, its breath made a weak hissing noise. Pale's chest was ripped with infected holes and scars. Pale's chest was wrapped up crudely in bandages which fluttered from the gusts of air coming out of some of the holes. "My chest was ripped with shotgun shells. I was able to breach containment from the morgue and killed all I saw," said Pale. "Didn't Tom kill you?" I said. "The important word is tried. He tried to kill me," said Pale. Pale's chest convulsed viciously as he coughed. It was pretty obvious that Pale was holding on to life with sheer luck. I grabbed a steel bar and made sure that it was visible. Pale stared at the bar. Pale's eyes suddenly fixed his gaze at me and turned more blood red than normal. "You will put the bar down." He spoke to me through telekinesis. I tried to contact him that same way. "I will not." Pale froze. His eye turned less bloodshot. I brought the bar down onto his head. Pale dodged and jumped straight up onto a building and ran away. The day after, I was assigned another mission, the Skinwalker. And my reinforcements? The whole gang, minus Mike, because he was busy. I was driving the Jeep, taking in the swampiness of the Everglades. It was 8 o'clock at night. We were joking around about something regarding Tom and Emily. Tom was dishing out some 6 out of 10 insults, while Emily was dropping straight bombs onto the group, even roasting Tom. When I saw a slim, tall figure with a wooden mask as well as large wood-like stalks for limbs, a skinwalker. It stood there, staring. I knew that skinwalkers can possess anyone who locks eyes with it, so I told everyone to close their eyes, and that's when the skinwalker jumped onto the car. It was seldom making any single noises as it tore into the top of the car. I told everyone to get out. I grabbed my shotgun and fired. It leapt off the car, splashing into the water. Emily fired a handgun, the bullet zipped into the water. The skinwalker morphed into a fish and dove into the water. Bob and Jaden jumped into the water, snorkels on. We knew that a battle in the Everglades meant getting wet. The river was pretty wide, so the two bastards had to separate. The skinwalker rose out of the water and grabbed Bob, so Bob plunged a dagger into the walker. Bob was thrown into a bush. Jaden got out and shot his rifle, ripping up the skinwalker. Tom fired his M16. The bullets tore up the skinwalker. The walker finally let out a roar. It clambered out the water, chasing Jaden, when suddenly a white figure, 10 feet tall, jumped onto the 6-meter monster. It was Pale. Pale ripped at the skinwalker's back, screeching with rage. The skinwalker stared at Pale. Pale stared back. The skinwalker screamed and shook its head. It reached around and threw Pale. Cue another barrage of bullets. The skinwalker kept fighting though, and Pale stumbled on and jumped on the skinwalker once more. It slammed Pale hard into a boulder. The boulder shattered, but Pale was still able to shake it off and keep fighting. We kept our barrage of bullets going, but it did jack shit when I heard Pale speak to me. "Josh, get your Molotov cocktails. The fire will kill the skinwalker." And I replied, "But it'll kill you." And Pale responded, "Like I'll care." Pale was ready to die. I quickly fished out a cocktail and prepared it. Pale got the skinwalker in a full Nelson, and I tossed it onto the walker. The skinwalker roared and screeched. It tried to get to the water, but Pale held firm. He looked at me with a little joy in his eyes. I was almost sad for him when he spoke. "Later, Josh. Although I only knew you for a bit, you were easily the nicest person I ever met." "Let go of me!" screamed the skinwalker. "Sorry, Paul. You and I need to sit a little bit longer," said Pale. The skinwalker went limp, and eventually Pale went limp as well. I was still a little sad that Pale was dead, but I still have plenty of things to worry about. I got everyone to the car and we drove away. Cut till now. I am now a Redditor. Me and Tom are 36. I have a lovely German Shepherd named Dakota, and I'm living a good life while hunting cryptids. The Mysterious Life of a Cryptid Hunter, Part 3, the finale. This brilliant series has been written by Reddit user ThickFrog15. Hey, I'm Emily. I'm 5'11", weigh 130 pounds and have blue eyes. My husband Tom is 6'3", 200 pounds and with light brown eyes. We hunt monsters. I am a failed attempt to make a super soldier. I was forced to undergo things no kid should ever experience. But unlike my fellow test subjects, I had feelings. I hated my captors. I dreamed of slitting their throats in front of their families. I dreamed I would kill all of them. I dreamed I would escape. There was a light in the darkness though. Pale. He was only 6 foot in height when I met him. He helped me learn to read, write, and taught me martial arts. He taught me to wield anything as a weapon. Taught me how to nimbly dodge attacks and how to kill. During one training session, he demonstrated how to slit the throat of a person, on himself. He let me slice in the wound. I recall every time the training would end, he would have cuts, bruises and deep gashes as well as broken limbs. But he recovered from it all. You guys may be wondering how I escaped. Well, it's a lot less exciting than you think. Pale used his long arms to lift me up into a vent. I crawled through the vent. I heard Pale's footsteps as he murdered each guard. I encountered one guard though. He tried to bash me with the butt of his gun, but I caught it and crushed it like it was paper. He tried to run, but I jumped on his back and snapped his neck. After that, Pale and I met up and killed everyone else in the facility. So, cut to now. I'm a 32-year-old hunter stalking a Mothman with Josh in Point Pleasant. We were skulking through the woods by a river that smelled as if someone mixed puke and their own shit together with a healthy dose of Axe body spray. I was gripping my revolver and tactical knife like they were the last two things I owned, as this was going to be a hard encounter. Luckily, Josh was by my side, holding his signature Molotov cocktails scarily close to a lighter. I've never felt this stressed out since the Wendigo incident, or when Tom showed me I'm on the FBI's top 5 most wanted list. But we got what we were for, in the form of a Mothman barreling towards my face. I was knocked down. It hopped onto me and started tearing into my sides with its razor blade like talons. I saw Josh draw his gun as the Mothman flapped his wing, knocking said gun out of Josh's hands. "Shit, I'ma punch it," cried Josh. "Don't do that," I said. "I'ma do it," he replied. Josh tried to punch it, but he ended up breaking his hand. Mr. Mothy got a hard head," he whimpered. "The damn thing's still on me," I shouted. I stabbed my knife into the gut of the Mothman. It shrieked and jumped away. Josh grabbed his gun with his non-broken hand and shot the Mothman to near shreds, but it was still alive. It flew towards us, only to be tackled by a weird white figure. It tore the Mothman to shreds. The figure stood tall, thin, pale. It was none other than codename Pale. "Okay, that was quick," Pale grunted. He was examining the cryptid's head. "Pale?" Josh said. "Yes, I'm Pale," he replied. "I thought I killed you," said Josh. Pale replied, "Thought? I didn't need that damn sass," said Josh. "I've almost died twice in a damn row. You'll be passive-aggressive as hell by the first time," responded Pale. "You and Pale know each other?" I said. So-and-so," replied Josh. I winced as I felt my torso. Josh was still trying to see if he could find a way to give his mangled hand a tad bit of support by trying and failing at wrapping his hand with bandages. "Josh, need help with that?" asked Pale. Pale walked over to help Josh. I saw his feet. They had leather slippers on them. Pale was living on his own. I was too busy looking at his shoes to realise he was looking at me. "Like my shoes?" said Pale. Sure. It's nice to see you at least wear shoes," I responded. Pale finished wrapping up Josh's hand and stood up. His eyes widened. I looked around. He stared at a figure walking on the bridge by the river. "We need to move," said Pale. "Why?" I responded. "I'll explain later. Where's your car?" "Why?" "Stop asking why and let's get moving," said Pale. Pale lifted me up and we booked it to the car. "Are you joking? You don't seem like a joking type," I said. "I don't seem like a lot of things because I'm a 10-foot tall Pale with leather slippers on. But no, I'm not joking." Pale picked me and Josh up and held us on his shoulders and started running even faster. He bounded over a stray cat, which promptly hissed at him. He kept running. He must have been moving at 40 miles an hour. He got to Josh's car, popped him in the back seat and I in the driver's side, and bashed his head getting into the passenger side. "Drive," said Pale. "Where?" I replied. "Yes," said Pale. I floored it and tore out of there to the nearest cryptid hunting facility. "God damn it, I just put new wheels on it," exclaimed Josh. "Wheels are the least of your problems," said Pale. "You were talking to a monster hunter," said Josh. "You're talking to a failed super soldier attempt who taught the driver of this car to snap the neck of a person twice her size," responded Pale. I always knew Pale was a failed attempt of some sort, but I didn't know he was a super soldier. I hit a bump and Pale's head bashed against the top of the car. As we pulled in, Tom was waiting there in full gear. When he saw me, he ran towards me and gave me a big, nearly rib-crushing hug. "Oh, thank God you're alive!" exclaimed Tom. "What happened?" I said. Turns out there was a never before seen cryptid real close to the area me and Josh were hunting in. It had killed an entire gang of monster hunters. The one survivor was threatened with his life. Bad ethics. To spill the beans. It was black in colour, 12 feet tall, faster than anything they've ever seen. Pale stepped out of the car to stretch and looked at all the guns pointed at him. "Sup?" he said. "Pale?" said Tom. "Hi, Tom. That shotgun sure looks familiar. So you drove in a car with that thing?" said Tom. "Huh?" I replied. "Am I asleep?" said Tom. "Nope," I replied. We were all sat in a room, Pale, me and Josh, in that order. They've asked us what we saw. I told him I saw nothing. Josh said the same, but he was examining the cast on his hand, so he didn't really pay much attention. When they got to Pale, he said, "I didn't see it correctly, but I think I know who it is." "Excuse me? Who?" said the interviewer. "He was my old cellmate. I lost touch when I got Emily out of the facility." "Oh, so she is the person we're looking for," said the interviewer. Pale shot up, grabbing the interviewer by the neck and held him up. "Ha ha, if you please, we asked Pale. Yeah, I work for the FB," said the interviewer. Pale tightened his grip on the interviewer's neck. His eyes turned a deep blood red. "What was that? I didn't hear you over the gurgling," said Pale. "Please, stop. I've got a wife and kids," said the interviewer. "Yeah, not gonna cut it. I've heard that way too many times," said Pale. "Help! Someone!" said the interviewer. The guards pointed their guns at Pale. Pale responded with an annoyed look. "I can crush with a force of 16,000 psi. I've never needed to crush someone with my bare hands, but I'll try it," said Pale. "Fine, I won't tell. Just let me go," squawked the interviewer. Pale dropped the interviewer onto his chair and sat down. The interviewer guy took some time before he could talk again. "Ah, yes. Good old code name, Dark. He taught me everything. I taught Emily. He was a dick, though. He stood 2 feet taller than I did. So, 8 feet at the time? Damn, that was 28 years ago. All I remember is that he had one hell of an attitude," said Pale. So there's more of you?" said Josh. "I wouldn't call him another of me, per se. I'm more of a copy of him," corrected Pale. Pale then explained how Dark and him could be a tag team. Pale mentally destroys the target by making them think they hear voices, and Dark destroys them physically. So that puts me in a weird place. I was confused. "Okay, we will put you in a cell," said the interviewer. "Cool, but remember, if you try to get her," points at me, "I'll know," said Pale. "My boss told me to take it easy for a while. As you know, scars." I was sitting in a chair wearing my pyjamas, watching the news. "Breaking news. Nearly 40 dead found scattered throughout the Point Pleasant area. Autopsies show deep gash wounds on the corpse's neck and chest, while authorities are searching for any signs of a weapon or item that could have caused such damage. People are blaming it on the legendary Mothman." "Funny, because they don't even know what it is," said Tom, slouching into his chair, soda in hand. We had just moved into a home in the most western part of New Jersey. I was looking at a raggedy teddy bear on a nearby shelf. This teddy bear is the only reminder of my days at the Super Soldier testing grounds. Pale stitched it together. He was good at knitting. I love that damn bear. I keep it as a good luck charm during missions. I slept with it on the cold nights when I was alone in the wilderness. It was ripped up, but I loved it no less. I walked over to the bear and picked it up. I just held the bear. Then something clicked in my head. It had a white button and a black button for eyes, and in the centre of its chest a red heart. Pale is white, dark is black in colour. It means you're a mix of us both, Emily. I spun around. Tom was out of his seat, nearly reaching for his revolver, when a dark hooded figure emerged from the shadows. It grew and grew and grew again. Eventually he was 12 feet in height. He grew thinner and tore off his hood and jeans, revealing a dark figure that looked like Pale but black and with a harsh yellow eye, codenamed Dark. Tom grabbed the revolver. He fired 4 shots. Dark dodged them all and leapt onto the ceiling. He started rapidly climbing towards Tom. I shouted, "Hey!" Dark bent his back backwards and started crawling towards me. Tom took the chance and shot Dark where his crotch should be. He bent back to a normal stance, still on the ceiling. He basically reached across the room and almost grabbed Tom. He dashed away. I grabbed a kitchen knife and rushed Dark. He threw a chair at me. I slid under the chair. I stabbed him in the shoulder, twisting the knife almost all the way round. It jumped down and tried to punch me. I blocked and took his feet from under him with a sweep kick. I rose my leg up for an axe kick, but he spider crawled away. He jumped on Tom, who punched him repeatedly in the eye. Dark was about to slash Tom's throat, but Tom grabbed the most unassuming weapon, a can of bug spray, and unloaded half the can into Dark's eye. Dark shrieked loudly. Tom thrust kicked him away and went for his revolver. Dark was still shrieking when he saw the half-empty can of spray and a lighter. He turned the lighter on and held the can behind it. "I'll burn this place to the ground," shouted Dark. "If they aren't 12-foot high flames, it ain't cool." "Pale? How are you here?" said Tom. "I'm everywhere," said Pale. Tom replied, "Like death." "No, do not remind me of that," shouted Pale. Dark cracked his knuckles. He was bigger and more muscular than Pale. But Pale had one thing. He could break Dark. Mentally, that is. Pale stated, "I'm about to make the idiom brains over brawn a real thing." "Screw off, you shit stain," said Dark. "Bro, you're black in colour, like pitch black. You're a tar stain," said Pale. Dark changed. Pale leapt out of the way. Dark performed a one-armed cartwheel to correct himself. Pale took this opportunity to club Dark in the head. Dark retaliated with a powerful uppercut to Pale. They started wailing on each other. Every time he got the upper hand, Pale would find a way to outsmart him. After a while, Dark grabbed Pale by the waist and smashed both of them through a window. Dark was on top of Pale, beating his face in. Pale punched Dark in the stomach. I needed to do something. I sprinted outside and jumped into the air. I nailed Dark in the face. He grabbed my leg and threw me into a wall. I crashed into the wall. Tom got to me just as my lights went out, then black. I woke up. My eyes took a while to adjust to the outside. Tom was shaking me, telling me to wake up. I jumped awake. I looked around the area. Pale was gone, and so was Dark. Cut to a few weeks later. Tom had boarded up the windows, and I had mostly recovered from the fight with Dark. Me, Tom, Josh, and a new hunter, Jerry, were in the Great Lakes area looking for a werewolf. Now, werewolves aren't like their movie counterparts. They regain all of their abilities of their human form, just as a wolf. They were also at least 7 feet tall, regardless of the age of the person. We were in a forest, waiting to be met up with another group of hunters. I was ahead of everyone when I heard a noise on my walkie-talkie used to communicate with the other hunters. "Help! Help us!" cried the voice. "Who is this?" I replied. "This is," said the voice, and then disconnected. The walkie-talkie was silent. I froze and turned to Tom. "You know the other group?" I asked. Yes," said Tom. I think they're all dead now, I said. Tom and the rest froze. We were in the most secluded part of the forest. Like, I'm talking little to no light pollution, dark. The only thing illuminating our way was our flashlights. Then we heard a low, menacing growl. I drew my barbed whip and pistol. Tom prepared his shotgun and trench knife. Josh drew his Molotovs and a lighter, and Jerry loaded his rifle. We were all back to back, Avengers style. The werewolf jumped out of the bush and almost got Tom. Tom, being the semi-clumsy person that he is, stumbled out of the way. The wolf landed in our circle, but I snagged it with my whip. It grabbed the whip, completely ignoring the barbs, and was about to pull me towards it, but I shape-shifted. See, when you shape-shift, you gain all the physical attributes of the thing you shape-shift into. So I morphed into a 7-foot-tall yeti and smashed the wolf into a bunch of trees. One downside to shape-shifting is if you morph into something too big, your clothes rip. So I've learned to wear semi-loose fitting clothes. I morphed back to normal and told Jerry to shoot. He fired 2 shots into the wolf, but it barely noticed them. I fired my pistol, but the bullets didn't hurt it. "That werewolf does not want to die!" exclaimed Josh. He threw one of his Molotovs and it lit the werewolf on fire, but the werewolf couldn't care less. "Well done, jackass," said Tom. I tried another creature to morph into, a Mothman. I did so and held the barb with my talons, after removing my shoes. I whipped it around the werewolf's neck and pulled up. I flapped my wings, lifting the burning, choking, struggling werewolf off the ground. I heard in the manual that if a werewolf is unable to breathe for a long enough period of time, it will turn human. Its screams started turning more human. I saw a nearby pond and dipped the guy into it to put out the flames. I undid the barb and morphed back into human. The man choked and coughed and had burns, but he was alive. As he was being loaded into an ambulance, I hobbled over to Tom, morphed back to normal, and asked him a question. "So, when's the court date?" "None. Turns out this guy is a registered sex offender, has multiple DUIs, has been in jail for almost every charge you can get, and on top of that, burnt down a nursing home. We actually got paid to bring this guy to justice," said Tom. "Yay! Finally my student loan debt can be paid," exclaimed Josh. What about the others?" said Jerry. We all froze. What about the other hunters? Did they die, or did they meet a fate worse than death? I watched as the guy was taken away. Tom shifted his weight from one side to the other. Josh checked his hand brace. Jerry stood there, wide-eyed. Can we speak in private, Mrs. Emily?" said Jerry. Okay," I said. He and I walked down to the lake area where I gave the wolf an extreme version of the ice bucket challenge. I wandered down to the shore of the lake when I heard a noise I'm all too familiar with, a knife being unsheathed. I spun around to see Jerry lunging at me. I grabbed his arm, but he got me into some kind of hold. We went to the ground. I tried wresting the knife from him, but to no avail. I stared directly into his eyes, realizing that this might be the day I die, when his eyes changed. They changed into more sorrowful, saddened, pained eyes. He started crying. I grabbed his knife and chucked it as far into the lake as I could. Albeit I probably threw it across the lake, but I wasn't about to check. I helped Jerry up and walked him to our shared car. After we flew home, got everything sorted out, and made sure that we weren't being followed, me and Tom were relaxing in our bed. Tom had Smudge, our lovely white cat, hates veggies though, on his hip, as he was lying sideways on his side. I was quietly reading a book. Our windows were open, but the night air was welcoming. That is, until I heard a noise. Emily! Emily! Emmy! Oh, screw it! Wake up! I was on the alert at this point. I quietly walked downstairs into the kitchen, grabbing the same kitchen knife I used on Dark. I got to the back door. I slid the door and screen door open and snuck outside. Pale was sitting on a hammock outside. He was swinging it as far as it would go without flipping over. He eventually swung too hard and fell flat on his face. He rose up, his pale white body being illuminated by the moonlight. He had an agitated look on his face, or his eye. "Sorry for the rude awakening. It's in fact quite urgent," stated Pale. It's 12 o'clock at night." Yeah. Turns out trains won't let a Pale, mostly naked, minus a loincloth and a pair of slippers, on a train. But I was sneaking through the monster facility thing, and I stumbled across some info about the Super Soldier Project. He handed me a document. Project Night Terrors. We have been testing 2 genetic materials that can possibly create a new super soldier. It will be tested on 2 subjects. Codename Pale. Codename Pale is a 6 foot, 150 pound male at the age of 17. He has been given the serum in controlled doses. Mostly, the serum has been sent directly to his brain in order to increase his redacted capability. He has gained 1 foot, from 5 foot to 6, no weight, and little to no increase or decrease in metabolism. However, he does display incredible redacted strength, able to speak with redacted, and has lost all facial features minus a big singular eye. He has learned sign language and is able to break out of his cell on the regular. Codename Dark. Codename Dark is an 8 foot, 230 pound male at the age of 19. He has been given the serum in controlled doses straight into his muscles in order to increase his redacted capabilities. He has undergone similar effects to Codename Pale, but his skin has turned a dark black colour instead of pale. He has displayed super redacted and displays every physical capability 2 times better than Pale. He displays more hostility than his Pale counterpart, but he is able to speak even without a mouth. Subject 513-81225. Subject 513-81225 is a 6-year-old, 4 foot 1, 70 pound female of Japanese heritage. She has been given the serum in controlled doses straight to her muscles and brain. She has displayed incredible redacted strength as well as redacted. She is able to multiply 7-digit numbers in the span of 0.2 seconds. She has outsmarted the guards many times, killed 7 and can hold her own against the other 2 subjects. She fights Codename Pale most often, which contradicts Pale's quiet nature. Interestingly, she has no altered physical state. She is as normal as ever. Signed, Data expunged. Everything clicked. I was a mix of the 2. That explains Jerry's reaction to my gaze. I was also super strong for that reason. I gave the paper back to Pale. "Thanks, that explains a lot," I exclaimed. "Even though so much info is redacted, I have a damn good idea of who it is," said Pale. Who? I said. Pale's feet shuffled. He seemed nervous about saying. "Oh, you don't need to know. I was him the entire time," said Dark. Pale and I looked up. Dark was perched on the roof, his body blocking the moonlight. But that's impossible. You were in a max security prison," stated Pale. "I didn't need to. If you guys didn't know, Project Night Terrors is not only not abandoned, but ongoing," stated Dark. "There were more kids going through what I went through. I morphed into a grizzly bear, and leapt up onto the roof. I rushed Dark. He prepared to slash. I ducked and battered him in the face. He grabbed my arms. We went down, pummeling each other all the way to the ground. He threw me off him, and I landed on my feet and rose up. Bears fight each other like wild boxers. I threw a jab at him. He blocked the attack, and I nailed his side with my claws. I slashed all the way down his side. Dark punched my face and I fell over. Pale rushed Dark, smashing him in the face. Dark grabbed Pale's arm and tore it off. He then dug his claw into his side and slashed all the way down Pale's side. Pale shrieked, but he pulled through the pain. He took his claws and mashed them into Dark's eye. Dark blood gushed out and onto Pale's hand. Dark screamed like there was no tomorrow. "Dark, you better bring a damn water bowl, 'cause I'ma send you to hell," exclaimed Pale. Pale grabbed the head of Dark. His hand throbbed as a burst of power surged through them, causing his hands to tighten into one powerful crushing move. Dark's head crushed like an overripe tomato. Pale tossed Dark's mangled skull onto the ground. He wiped his hand off. I wandered up to Dark. I gave his imploded head a little kick. The mangled head tilted lifelessly. I turned around to face Pale. "What do we do now?" I asked. Pale gave me a sad look. He waved at me. He wandered into the forest and disappeared into the darkness, his pale body merging with the blackness. I wandered into the house and sat down on the bed. Tom and Smudge were fast asleep. This was roughly 4 years ago. Me and Tom are still together. I'm happy with my life. Although it has been hard, I made it. This is Emily. Out. Wow, that was an awesome episode. Now if you enjoyed listening to this installment, be sure to pop over to the author's Reddit profile, ThickFrog15, and drop them a line, or even give them a glowing review. The link to their Reddit profile will be below in the description. Thank you for listening. Now if you enjoyed my narration, then please feel free to like and share the video. Leave a comment below. Maybe tell us how you would handle these situations. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and tap that notification bell, then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. Even though I'm not yet monetized by YouTube, I have created some awesome merch for you guys. So please be so kind as to visit redbubble.com/people/cryptids-roost and grab yourself a t-shirt, mug, wall clock, or even a shower curtain, whatever grabs your fancy. The link is in the description. Now have you had any cryptid sightings, paranormal or supernatural encounters, or even had a creepy or terrifying situation you would like to share? Or have you even written a CreepyPasta story that you would like me to narrate? You could submit all your stories, etc. to cryptidsroost@gmail.com. And if you wish to remain anonymous, that's fine with me. I also have a Facebook group, Twitter, Reddit and Discord. If you would like to support the channel and help make it grow, my PayPal is paypal.me/Cryptids Roost. Again, that will also be below. And thank you. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not.